Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third of these talks. I'm just going to launch a little poll in the background and just seeing who has been to some of them before so I can understand how to guide the content. Okay, so a mix coming in of people who have been on the course, some of them who have been here before and some who haven't. Okay, that's fine. And I know we have some people on Facebook live as well. So good to speak to you all. Just in the background, I like if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. I like Q&A. It means that I'm not, it's interactive. So please feel free, jump into the Q&A, pop in any question, and we get to them throughout or at the end. I'll get through all of them. Okay, good. So let's get started. Okay, so this is the final of 3 series on leadership and what it means in agile organizations or agile teams. And I use the word agile very generally. You know, often we say modern office or new thinking around teams. It doesn't have to be specifically agile. Sometimes the word agile creates more confusion than it's meant to. Okay, so just a little bit about me. I'm what they call an agile coach. So I've been working with lots of different teams, looking at the way they work and looking at ways to improve the way they work, about how they think about projects and actually how they work on projects as well. Our agenda for today. So the first, well, I'll go backwards in time a little. The first week we talked about agile leadership qualities. So they were very much the qualities of an agile leader. What maybe some of them you have, some of them you need to work on. But I like to put these qualities out there and people can map their capabilities against them. We talked about the importance of emotional intelligence, both internally, knowing yourself and how you learn and what your trigger points are. And we looked at then emotional intelligence in the social context. And that was the whole of last week. Got a lot of feedback on that one. Recap. So I'm going to be recapping a little on some of the general agile points that will make this talk more relevant. And then we're going to talk about the where practices and tools sit within the agile map. So we look this talk is about practices and tools for an agile leader, and we'll see where it fits in the overall map of being agile. And the need for engagement. So we look at engagement, we look at the team charter and the retro, just 2 techniques that I work with teams on. Okay. So just to recap where we are, the first 2 weeks we talked mainly about the agile mindset, the values, and the principles. These are the things that are underneath the waterline. They're hard to see. They don't really manifest themselves in anything physical, but they certainly exist and they're certainly important. They are nearly more important than the tools and techniques. So I always say if I'm working with a team that we start with the mindset, the values and principles, and then we get into the practices and tools. Often we start with the tools without ever really addressing the shift in mindset and values that needs to take place for agile adoption to be successful. Okay, and in the background of all this is that the way organizations are structured is changing. We're moving from a very functional, siloed, the diagram on the right there, functional and siloed groups, marketing, sales, tech, all the other groups, into what's called cross-functional teams. So you have teams of different capabilities and skills on them. So you see on the bottom on the left in red, we have process-driven. When we were functionally aligned in silos, very much process-driven. There was little innovation beyond efficiency within our silo. And from a human perspective, there was little engagement. People came to work, did their job, everything, they were told what to do, very much task driven. Whereas the organizations that are doing well today are the ones who have the cross-functional teams, where the team is allowed to experiment, that there is different views on the team, that it's a meeting of minds. It's not a command and control, and it's innovative. the evolution of disruption. So we've covered all this in the first two sessions, but the idea of that workers today are different than workers in the past. And innovative are disruptive organizations. Innovation is driven by people and teams, and it's not driven by massive amounts of capital or owning big machines or owning big factories or efficiencies or scale. It's teams. So you have some very small teams who come up with some very clever, very disruptive businesses. Big organizations have recognized this. They've actually been threatened from this. Take, for example, fintechs and banks. They at the beginning, they didn't really take fintech seriously. Now they take them quite seriously. And they also take the tech fins seriously on the other side. That's the big technology companies who are beginning to offer financial services. So big companies or traditional companies are investing a lot in becoming more agile. So agility as a critical success factor. We talked before about the rhythm of innovation as well. I won't go into that. This one, and the ability of our team, our front-facing teams, to have the authority to experiment, break things, disrupt, come up with new things, think about things differently. So, summing up everything we've talked about before is the modern workers are different, not to be treated like machines, which are complicated. Complicated means if I have a watch and I take a little screw out of that watch, the whole watch doesn't work. But if I put that screw back in again, the watch works again. People are different. People are complex. And by complex, I mean, if you take one piece out or move one piece, it has these other repercussions throughout the system that is very hard to plan for. So people are complex. We need a deeper understanding of how they tick. We need to understand how they're motivated or demotivated. So motivation is more, with agile organizations, more towards intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation. Okay, extrinsic motivation are title, pay, bigger office. Intrinsic things are a sense of purpose, aligned values, curiosity, a job that gives me satisfaction because it allows me to learn and grow. All of those things are intrinsic motivators. So on agile organizations, we tend more towards intrinsic than extrinsic motivators. So we need to design for inclusive structures for teams. So this is what most of today's talk about is inclusive structures for teams. So by structures, I mean these are things that leaders, when I talk about leadership in agile, there's lots of leadership is distributed on agile teams. Everyone brings their skills, capabilities, and their ability to lead in their specialist area. So inclusive structures are activities, are techniques that we can use to get people engaged on the team. Okay, so why is engagement important? So actually, I'm going to go back a slide and I'm going to release a poll. And if you can see, I'm going to close that old one and I'm going to launch the new poll. Okay, so everyone should be able to see that. If you can just, according to Gallup, what percentage of workers are engaged worldwide? And I'll explain what engage means as well, but if you can just take your vote there where we think what percentage, generically across the world, 35% most people say. Okay, is good. 50, no one on 15, and no one on 75. So 50 to 35. Okay. So according to Gallup, the answer is actually 15% of people are engaged. That means that 85% are disengaged. They come to work, they're told what to do, they leave. They have no psychological investment in their organization. Okay. And why is it important that our people are engaged? 71% of leaders, of executives, say that people engagement is critical to their company's success. 69% of employees say they'd work harder if they were better appreciated. Now, engagement on agile teams needs to be strong. We put a lot of credit in, or we value discussion, we value debate, we value diversified opinions, looking at problems. We want people highly engaged. Now, in that 15% people disengaged, there are anomalies. And the ones I picked out are USA, where there's higher engagement. There's more people feel that they are engaged in their workplace. Now, maybe it comes from there's lots of small businesses or owner-occupied businesses, but I think a lot of it comes from the Californian, the Valley, San Francisco, all around there, all those companies, those high-tech companies that are able to churn out innovation after innovation after innovation, that weighs a lot towards engagement, that you've got engaged organizations. UK didn't come out too well in that poll. So agile teams need high level of engagement. So what is employee engagement? So here's some quotes I got from these guys. I'll just read one of them. But Quantum Workplace defines employee engagement as the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel towards their workplace. Okay. So techniques for inspiring engagement. And this is an area of special interest to me. It's how do we get more people involved? So on the left, we have the elephant in the room, people feeling excluded, marginalized, disengaged, meetings, waiting, all of those things disengage people. So one of the ones I like, and it's a takeaway from here, is liberating structures. So if you look up the website, Liberating Structures, they have a number of techniques that are designed to turn meetings into something that is much more engaging. Okay, so what is an engaging meeting? It's something, well, it's very different than what we're giving now, where it's a broadcast one way. But we see on the left, we have things like where it's one person and very little engagement, or very little including actions, things like status reports, managed discussions, presentation, open discussion, brainstorming. They while brainstorming and open discussion are engaging, it's usually led by one person. So I'm just going to release a little poll here. The team meetups. Okay, so team meetups, meetings, updates, planning in your organization. Are they inclusive or exclusive or non-inclusive or a mix? Okay, good. Okay, well, we have a mix here. We have mostly a mix, so great. So you feel that your organization has meetings, updates, plans that are inclusive, that you feel you're involved, everyone is involved. Okay, that's good. And then some people are outliers on engaged, and then some are very much it's what the boss says. Okay, so good mix in close. Okay, so liberating structure. So here's I'm not going to all of them, but each one of these is some sort of activity that is almost gamified. They're enjoyable. They're very inclusive. Everyone gets involved. The big ones I use is 1, 2, 4, all. So it's a great way of bringing the opinion, getting everyone involved in a big discussion. And this has been used in big conferences with hundreds of people. Yeah, definitely that's a takeaway. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about 2 areas. And remember, this is about doing Agile. This is very physical. It's manifest, something exists. The last 2 lectures we talked about was very much about under the water. It was more on, it was about values, principles. But today we are talking about, today we're talking about something that actually exists. So a team charter. Okay, now I don't know, do people use team charters? Okay, do people know what team charters are? I'll just release a little poll to see who has done, so my team has a charter that I was actively involved in building or not. Okay. 1. Okay, so it's very much no, that we don't have a team charter. Okay, so team charters are something that I find very useful, particularly in early teams that are forming. Are they easier to do in new teams that are forming? They can be done for existing teams, absolutely. So team charter. So what is a team charter? Team charter is something that it's an artifact that's developed that the team can visit at any time, and that it has important things in there about the, what's our vision for our team? What's the value our team produces? Okay. What resources can we use? What are our, how do we get work done? How do we decide on things? Are we clear on our goals? Who the authority and accountability, resources. So it has all of these things here. So leadership is, so what we're saying about now, team charters have existed for a long time. You have project charters, you have team charters, these things, there's nothing new here. Often they are written by management, and they're imported into the team somewhere, and they stay as an artifact hidden somewhere, and a lot of people don't know about them. But in Agile, we do something a little bit different. We develop what is called a Agile team charter or a culture charter. Okay, so I'm just going to release another poll just on who do you think should write one of these things? So remember, in Agile, we cede authority, decision-making power to the team. We want the team to take accountability and trust, and we want the team to be collaborative. We don't want to be too prescriptive, which means we don't want to tell them to collaborate. We want them to be intrinsically motivated to collaborate. We certainly can help with structures in the organization. Like one discussion I had the other day was around pay, around reward, individual performance versus team performance, which is more important for an Agile team. And obviously, you can still have individual, but the more important one is team, team reward, team compensation. So it's the people are motivated to be more, think of in team terms, or think in collaborative terms. Okay, great. So we have it back in. So some people say team leader and the team. It's actually the team is the right answer here. So when we're developing a culture design, I'll show you a few different versions of it, but a Agile team charter or a team charter, it's the team. The leader acts in the role as facilitator, but it's the team are the ones who come up. So if we just look a little bit on this one, we can see that in this one, it's got its team date, but it's got how we make decisions, how decisions are made. Okay, so we come up, and this is done. The team is in a safe place. We don't like people who are not from the team. You might have an advisor come in to help facilitate. You certainly will need a leader. Sometimes the Scrum Master takes control of this. Sometimes it's someone else on the team, but it's not meant to be influenced by HR or anyone else. So now we can publish it later on. We can let anyone can see it, but it shouldn't be influenced or forced upon the team. So how do we make decisions? What's our priorities? What do we think is the most? What's most important to us? Okay, we have things like rituals. What rituals we get on? And in Agile, we have the obvious rituals of the stand up, the 15-minute morning. If that's what works for your team, we can have sprint planning, and we can have showcase, and we can have retro, and whatever other rituals that we find that works for us. So the team get together, they discuss this and put in here. Meetings, how do we conduct meetings? What kind of meetings will work? How do we limit too many meetings? We talk about our purpose and value. Okay, now this is a big discussion. Whenever I do this with a team, they try to put it in for 20 minutes, but this actually could be a 2-hour conversation. What is the purpose of our team? And what value do we bring? Now, if you notice nowadays, there's a lot more roles, the titles of roles. Instead of going from marketing manager, sales manager, it can be, you can see things like chief employee experience officer or onboarding officer, or the team can be, we're in charge of the onboarding process. So rather than the team being functionally aligned, I'm in sales and I report to the sales manager, I'm on a team who's responsible for onboarding, a cross-functional team. So the clearer we can get this, it's really important to the team. And it's amazing the amount of teams I work with, and it's really hard for team members to say what the purpose of the team is, beyond the fluffy things like, oh, make the customer happy and all that. But they're not that clear on here's the value we bring, here's the start point, here's the end point, here's the complete cycle of value, or the flow of value end to end. So that's important that we all understand this. We have our values. What values does our team have? What do we value most? Or is it learning new things? It is trying things. Is it openness? Is it honesty? Is it transparency? All of those things in our values. Is it feedback? And we know in Agile teams that feedback is something very important, that we want to be open about feedback, and we want to give it in a constructive and mature way. And we also want to receive it in a mature way. Often people get defensive if somebody if they perceive someone as criticizing them. But our team, we value quick feedback, open. It's one of the key foundations of a Agile team values. And there's a whole section on feedback, how we give feedback to each other, what tone we use, physically how we do it. Is it done face to face? Do we sit down? So all of these things. So maybe we've a place we go. Maybe we can feedback on, this is the way we do feedback on the work we're doing, how we get feedback. We believe in feedback, so we're constantly getting feedback from customers. And it can be also feedback about how we work together, whether that's the work process or how we get on with each other. Norms and rules, so anything we want to have in around norms and rules in the bottom left, any rules we abide by, or any norms. The obvious one is here: we show up for meetings 1 minute before they're meant to start. We ensure we give people notice before we have a certain time before we have a meeting. And then behaviors, what we punish and what we reward, the type of behaviors we want. So we can put that in there. Again, the hard bit here is not for the leader to dictate this or write this up on their own. This is for the team themselves. And when we get the team present, this is hard. Like I've worked with many teams on this, and some people do not like talking about this. Some team members, it's either too soft, they feel uncomfortable, or they're not engaged. They're just, if maybe they're engineers and they're just saying, look, I just want to get on with my engineering. I just want to code. How do we get them to be present for this meeting? And it's amazing to see the maturity of a business evolve if this is handled the right way, and how much this helps a team later on when they have this. And then psychological safety. So psychological safety is how do we make people on the team feel that the team has got their back, that people feel safe, that they can they can talk, they feel safe about raising an issue, or they feel safe about asking a question, that stuff is confidential within the team. So this idea of how we build psychological safety, because we know high performing teams have a high level of psychological safety in them. So this is quite an important one. Now, this shouldn't be taken as a checklist. So you'll see in a few minutes some of the other examples of this. This isn't a checklist. You have to do it exactly like this. This is something that's unique to each team. In fact, coming up with the sections we put in is part of bonding or forming the team. So this shouldn't be taken as a checklist. It's more of a journey that we have to go through. Everyone should be present when we're doing this. And again, as a leader, you should be one facilitating this, not leading it. We've even, as in the training world, we've even moved away from the word of trainer, and we're now called facilitators. Okay, so checklist. Yeah, so it's a journey rather than a checklist. Okay. Here's another one. Another one I've seen being used. This one's from Dandy People, a great website to go to. There's lots of good resources on there, lots of good posters you can use. But their culture canvas looks at if any other difference. What are our roles? Who does what? Key competencies. What each person is good at. And you can see there they have the T-shaped. They have the I-shaped individual who's good at one thing. The T-shaped is good at one thing, but can work cross-functionally on other things, not to the same depth, but can work cross. And then there's the new word, which is the pie-shaped individual, which actually is, I'm good at one thing, I can work cross-functionally, I can work in other areas, but I'm actually developing my competency in these other areas. So good agile teams are cross-functional, but the people themselves become cross-functional because they learn new skills and they're constantly thinking and encouraged to learn new skills. So we get this pie shaped, and those two little lines going down are at different levels because that person is developing them. So what are our key competencies? Our principles, our working agreement, and then we have who's our team members. What are our learning goals? What do we want to learn as a team? Where do we want to go to? Our improvement goals, what improvement goals we have. We have our ceremonies, our definition of done. It's a beautiful term from Agile. Is what do we consider? What's our agreement on what is done? When is it done? You know, different viewpoints on what done. I see this quite a lot in cross-cultural teams that span different cultures on what does done mean, and in whose perspective is a piece of work done. And then key stakeholders that the group knows. Now, think about a culture canvas or a team canvas or whatever you want to call it, a team charter, is that this is something that's living. It's not written once and put away and never visited again. This is something that we revisit from time to time. And this can be facilitated by the leader, that they might take it out once every quarter or every month and say, look, do we need to update this? Well, obviously, if a team member changes, but do we need to update this? Do we have new goals? Have we accomplished anything? Is there some things that we thought were valid before, but they're not valid now? So it's very much a living document that we work on and we're willing to change. And we do visit it and we do encourage people to see it. Some teams have it up, pride in place, stuck in a wall near where they can see it, or it's on their, maybe in the virtual world, it's on their team, the team notice board. You can see one here. This is another one, a team charter, and a very simple one. They talk about, you know, what's important to them. Okay, and ones I can pick out are support each other, no blame, you know, raise concerns promptly, take pride in your work. All of these things can have a deeper knowledge. They can have a deeper meaning, and the team is encouraged to talk through them and explore them and what do they mean, particularly if a new person comes on board. Any questions? Does anyone want to put anything into the questions? Anything in the Q&A? Okay. Okay. Good. So we have a couple of Q&A. So hi, how do we measure the effectiveness of team charters? Okay, good question. How do we measure its effectiveness? Well, if we've got a team, you can do what is called an in the retro, which we're going to look at next. You can do a thing which is got to do with team happiness. So we do a 1 to 5. So I just draw on the board what we call a spider web, or so it's like 4 lines coming out, and one is in the center, and 5's at the end, and we put clarity of purpose. We put in these other little happiness indexes, these little happiness scales, and you can work out if a team is feeling that they're on top of their work. So culture, you can tell if a team is doing well just by their performance of the team, that people are happy working on the team, that the team is hitting its work goals. So if you look, there's a project by Google called Google Oxygen. If you look at that, they talk about the characteristics of a high-performing team, and a lot of things that are in the charter are what they rank highly as an effective team. Okay, next question is, do you have an example of a team charter for your team? Yeah, I'm just showing you there. That was probably a few minutes ago. So there's lots of different types. Yeah, just look it up. There's lots of templates in there. Some of them are more detailed. Some of them are quite short, like the one we're looking at now. I would say find one that works for your team and treat it not as a task list, not as the leader writes it, but as everyone is engaged and present for when we're doing up this team. Everyone gets a chance to talk. I was saying, I worked with a team recently and they budgeted in half an hour to go through this. And I said, no, this takes 2 hours. And we were only halfway through it after 2 hours. So getting and making sure everyone gets an opportunity to talk about each part. Okay. Okay, and the third question is, you mentioned that team charter is developed in the early stages of team building. Can this be done at later on? Yes, a team charter certainly can be done at a later part. Absolutely. We can We can introduce it as an idea. The important bit is getting people behind it, that they believe in it. And if it's an older existing team, they might have some credibility issues, but this is the job of the leader to bring them with you, to say, look, we're putting something up. And sometimes these things exist in an informal way anyway, and we're just really putting it down on paper, or we're trying to align expectations that someone might be a little here and someone might be down a bit, and then we're trying to meet somewhere in between. So I guarantee you, if you get the right space and you get people engaged in this, it's a really interesting conversation to put one of these things up there, if we get people to commit to it. Okay, good. Keep the questions coming. I love the questions, and I hope they're answering your questions. Okay, so that's on the team charter. I hope everyone's okay with that. And we're going to move on to another little tool I like to use, is the retro. Now, I am sure that people have heard of retro before. It's one of the it's a big part of generic Agile, but they all use it, Scrum, XP, and it's something that we value dearly in Agile organizations is what we call self-organization or self-improvement. So rather than someone being focused on just improving the tasks they work on, they're actually improving the way they work on them, the way the team works on them. So this is time out. Retro is, well, I'm going to launch a poll to see what people think it is. So if you can have a look at the poll. So as a team, we take planned time out to self-improve our work process. Okay, so never, and we've won. And then a few times a year, on a regular basis, at least once a month, 3, and then on an ad hoc basis. Okay, good. Use that. So retro. So a typical retro looks something like this. We take time out. Maybe if we're using Scrum or we're using we're using iterations, we take time out maybe at the end of an iteration, and it's where the team doesn't talk about the project they're working on. They talk about how they work on, how they work as a team. Okay, it's time out. It only takes an hour. It's not meant to be seen as just another boring meeting. It's not a task. It's meant to be done in a fun and engaging way. So we take time out and we say, no one's allowed to talk about the project. What we want to talk about is, and we keep it positive. We put maybe 3 areas on a board and we talk about, well, what worked well? What could we improve? And what we'll commit to doing in the next sprint or the next iteration. Okay. What worked well? What could be improved? And maybe new ideas, the generic one. So we've got enough time there. People put up maybe we do it on stickies, they put up stickies, and then we talk about it. The idea here is the team is allowed to discuss how they worked on a team, and then come up with ideas how to improve that. So this brings the onus back on the team themselves to make improvements. Okay, allows them. People get quite interested in this, and it demonstrates that we trust the team, that they're allowed to, that they can try new things. So it's moving away from this command and control to something where we're talking about, we're allowing individuals and we're allowing teams to call out what isn't working, what could be maybe wasteful, and where they think we could make improvements. Okay, so we want to make these retros engaging. So the more, just like the liberating structures, the more we can make these things participative, the better. So this one's used quite a lot. This is the idea of the sailing trip going, and we see that there's behind us, there's certain aspects that are like the wind that are pushing the boat forward. These are things that are helping our team. So we can put up what well. We can, the sea anchor is anything that's delaying us, what's slowing us down. And we can be open about this. This can be anything from technology we're using. It could be wasteful meetings. It could be delays or dependencies on outside maybe other teams or other parts of the organization that are slowing us down. And then we look at risks, and these guys they reinforce, here's the goals or where we want to get to as a team in our work process. So this makes it interesting. Everyone puts things up on the board, but the metaphors. There's lots of different ways you can run retros. So the tips or is you must get the team present. Often people are fatigued from meeting after meeting after meeting, and this is just something they want to get out of the way, or this is something they come to and they just start talking about the project. They start bringing up the project. So it's important as a leader, if you're facilitating this, is to make sure people are present, that they're engaged, that they're not thinking about the project, that they're thinking about the work process. Here's another one. That's the star one. What do we start do? What can we stop doing? What can we do less of? What do we want to do more of? What do we keep doing? And it's amazing. And again, we don't want to be prescriptive as a leader, telling people what they should be doing. We want the team to be able to come up themselves and call out something that isn't useful and something that is useful. Okay, so maybe more of those kind of design thinking meetings where we bring customers in, engage it, and maybe less of these status updates that very little people read anyway. So this is the idea that we can these issues and opportunities will surface given the team. Often we're too busy with focusing on the urgent to actually take time out and actually think about how we can improve the process itself. Just going a little deeper. So I've just introduced, because we're running low on time, I've just introduced retros, but to go even deeper, and there's lots of, you can read up about retros. There's lots of things as a facilitator, how you can make retros run really good. But I like to think of it that often we have this single loop learning, and single loop learning is where we get our results based on the strategies and techniques, what we're using, based on what we've been told, are our plans, we're criticizing, but often we need this double loop learning where we go way back and we maybe challenge our assumptions. So why we do what we are doing? Why are we doing it this way? Maybe there's something in our assumptions, and often we take our assumptions as solid, but it's often when we challenge those assumptions, we might find out something completely new that will lead to some innovation on the way we work as a team. Any Q&A or any questions up here? So let's try and get one or two more Q&A in. Okay, so in summary, Agile leaders think of their, sorry, there's a typo in there. Agile leaders think of their organizations as multi-layered human systems, okay? Very much human based. So, and people are complex, not complicated. Machines are complicated. You fix the broken spring and the whole machine works again. You just replace it with another spring. People are different. You can't just replace one person with another. People are more complex. Things happen at different levels. One of our biggest battle leaders face is engagement, and we saw that from the Gallup figures, and we know that Agile organizations are highly engaged teams. So we have people on the team who feel safe, that they can talk up. We want people having, we won't call it arguments, but we want debates. We want vigorous debates, because that vigorous debates means engagement. Okay, particularly around intrinsic motivators, things about purpose, around the value, about being able to influence outcomes. All of those things are important for Agile teams, and these are all the things that the Agile leader should be orchestrating. We know people are complex, we've talked about that, and then people roles are complicated by the fact that they simultaneously participate in multiple systems and subsystems. So this means that, yes, it's really hard to ring fence our team, because often, particularly in bigger organizations, is people on our team also work with people on other teams, and there might be multiple layers to this. So if we make one change to some aspect of our team here, it can influence other subsystems and other teams within our organization. So yeah, Agile leader in a multi-team environment has to consider that. There are, okay, so there's, yeah, the hidden dependencies and the intradependencies. Okay, so being able to understand it, particularly with human relationships. Okay, and then what policies and decisions in one context may have unintended consequences in another. Okay, so we might make a decision to do something, but it might, just like in a complex environment, it will have reverberations and unintended consequences elsewhere. So we need to be mindful of that. Okay, so we've got some examples here. So how is Agile flow different from PDCA model? Plan, do, act. Plan, do, act. What's that? Plan, do, check, act. Okay, I'm not really sure I understand plan, do, check, act. None is what it says is. So maybe you want to just put in a little bit more information on plan, do, check, act, and just describe the your question a little bit more. And I'll move on to the next one, and I'll come back to that one. So hello, where can I get good examples for retros that you have used? Okay, so yeah, good question. Retros, when we're all face to face, you run a retro in a room with a big whiteboard, and you write up on the board using sticky notes. There's lots of good examples if you look them up. Something that I've been using recently in the virtual world with my teams is Retrium. So retrium.com, if you go there, it's a tool simply just for retros. Okay, now you can do it with sticky notes on any of the boards, Jambot or anything like that, but I like Retrium. I think they've really thought about it, and they've got a really good blog section where they talk about some Scrum Masters, some very good Scrum Masters talk about how they run their retros. So I'd use that. Okay, any other questions? And okay, I'll get back to the question about the PDCA. So the plan, do, check, act. I guess it's similar. I haven't come across it, but it's, in Agile we talk about. Oh, here he goes. Here he sent me a Wikipedia link. I'm not going to be reading a Wikipedia link from here. I don't think it's even clickable. It's unclickable from here. Okay, so if we're talking about the generic Agile model where we break down work into, rather than traditionally we have the big waterfall approach where we do a big prescriptive analysis phase, and then we go into a design phase, and then we go into a test phase, and then we go into a build phase. And it's designed like a waterfall, so it's really hard to go back up to make changes. You can make changes, but it's quite disruptive. In Agile, we break down pieces of value, and we iteratively release them. So we build small pieces and we get feedback. It's called the empirical method. So we get feedback on that, and then based on that, we go on to the next step. Okay, so you can have a big backlog of work to get through, and we take the highest priority, we deliver something in small chunks, and we get feedback. Okay. Any other questions? So I guess that plan, do, check, act. Yeah, it sounds like we do a plan, we do it, then we test it, and then based on that test and that feedback we get, we act upon it. So yeah, so it's an empirical approach. Now, lots of organizations some teams don't use the iterative approach. They use more of a Kanban approach where there isn't iterations. It's just we do the work that's of the highest value next, and we move along that way. Okay, any other questions out there, everyone? Okay, anything in chat or Q&A? Okay, so takeaways are understand that look into the intrinsic motivators, ensure your teams are engaged. There's techniques out there. We talked about two of them. One is developing the process or the journey of developing a team charter, that is aligned to the Agile values. And then three is the idea of the retro, taking time out for the team to discuss and suggest improvements and call out where things that are not helping them delivering value. Okay. So if there is no other questions, we will sign off. I will leave my details up the top. If anybody wants to follow up and send any questions or get in contact, network, just Here we go. You can contact me. I'm based down in level 3, or on r1training.com is our website. With that, then I will, if there's no more questions, we will sign off.